We had an audit of the organization, which took, we had a leading firm do it. And they came back and said, there isn't any use of you trying to continue. You have no money, fold your tent.
We were not in a good position economically or philosophically.
We had one sponsor for a few $1,000s, and that was it.
We were advised maybe we should just close the books and shut the organization down and shake hands and move on.
And the only way that it didn't happen is Copeland wouldn't let it happen.
I'm Jim Copeland from the National Forensic League, and today we're going to talk about an introduction to debate analysis.
I remember Jim when he first burst upon the forensic world in the mid-1960s, and it was quite an achievement. He very quickly won the national sweepstakes and did that not once but many times. I lost count, but he certainly set the standard by which I think all of the people in the activity came to judge it.
I remember Jim the first time in the early 70s having incredibly good debaters, incredibly good orators, extempors, and I learned a great deal about how to coach, and I learned a great deal about how to be successful in terms of the activity from him, because he was the pinnacle. He was kind of the mountain that you wanted to try to reach.
Oh, I would pay big bucks if I could go back in time and sit in the back of his classroom and watch his coaching style. I mean, his teams and his participants, they just dominated the national tournament back in my early years.
In the early years I was coaching, I would go in the summertime to Georgetown, and I would sit in on the classes that Jim Copeland taught, Ralph Carey taught, and I would sit virtually at the knee of the masters and learn more about policy debate and extemporaneous speaking. I learned so much about extemp from Jim Copeland. It was just absolutely amazing.
I felt that Jim Copeland was a person to take over, even though he had abandoned the activity. It took a lot of coaxing to get him to the meeting, because he said, why am I there? I'm no longer, I resigned, you know? And I said, no, you need to be at the meeting. We need your experience and your opinions. But my real reason to getting Jim there was because I felt that we had to replace the current leader, and Jim was not only inadequate, he was an outstanding person to do so. Now, Jim had a reputation as a coach for being very confrontational, very protective of his own teams. So when I proposed that Jim Copeland become the executive secretary, you could hear a pin drop, because people could not believe that I made that proposal. It caused a large gasp and then silence.
I think there are lots of myths and great stories out there about this period of time, 98% that aren't true, but they make a good story. We needed a leader. He stepped up.
Jim's first recommendation from the NFL lawyers that NFL should be dissolved and abandoned, and Jim says, I don't think so.
Because of the good wishes of Mr. Roberts, I became secretary after a crisis. And it was very fulfilling to see if I could clean up the mess and keep this thing going. When our auditor told us we had no assets and should declare bankruptcy and go out of business, that was a goad. And then starting to go around to all these different districts and district tournaments and educational conferences with the coaches and so on, to know that I've got to keep something alive that's worthwhile.
When he came the first day, he set us, the whole entire staff, down, and he talked to us. And he told us what he expected and what he had hoped to accomplish, and not to worry because he wasn't going to move the office and he wasn't going to fire staff, you know, and his goal was to get NFL into the next century and, you know, and to make it bigger than it was.
And I think Jim saw such value in this organization that he said, I'm not gonna, if I can prevent this, I'm gonna do what I can.
So first of all, he financed the activity for 6 months. We had no money. We had been given reports that there was money, but they were false. So therefore, Jim wrote out checks from his own accounts and paid the help for months.
We survived the potential financial ruin, but yet somehow the tenacity of the people involved, the leaders that were given those opportunities, allowed us to propel through. And I think it's because no one will accept the idea that the world doesn't need speech and debate.
I think he saved the league. He saved the National Forensic League.
I've been in this for 7 decades, and it's day and night. I will just say, and I've stated this before, when I first got involved in speech and debate, the leadership of this organization had nothing to do with rank and file. You know, we got name tags. I think that's so that the leadership could walk up and talk to you and read who you were, because they didn't know you. They didn't really care. Well, after you start doing well, then they want to know who you are, and I always resented that.
Especially when I was a young coach in the late 70s and early 80s and everything, I knew a number of the people that were on the board, but it was still the feeling of when you went up and approached them, it was almost like you needed a genuflect, you know, and kiss a ring or whatever.
Well, that began to change after a point, and then, of course, when Scott took over, and the board all changed, the attitude changed, the approach changed. It became human talking to human. And I want to commend the organization for what it is now.
And I think in the time that I've been on the board, it has really gone from this, you know, mystique and everything else to a much more transparent working board. And as a result of that, I think we've been able to accomplish some great things.
There's been the right combination of leadership emerge at the critical moments.
There are situations where the rest of us were sort of cowering in the background, and Jim would simply say, let's do it. There's a way to do it, we can do it, people will be bent out of shape, and they were. But it got done. NFL is now here, still here. The size of the tournament, the size of the organization, the size of what we're doing, the outreach programs we have, all that's Jim's vision. And we wouldn't have had that without his vision. So I'm very grateful to him for being brave enough and confident enough to lead us when we didn't want to be led.
If we don't remember the past, we're doomed to failure. We have to recognize the past and keep that in our back of our head so we don't go and commit those same egregious errors in the future.
Anytime I hear people like Donis Roberts or Jim Copeland speak, it reminds me of what a tiny bit of the history my role is, or any of the current people's roles are. And it's the resiliency of the desire for the activity to exist that allows the kind of the cream to float to the top on leadership. And that as long as the activity and the organization makes space for the creativity that's necessary to create those solutions will happen.